And welcome to the Daily Space Weather Show. If you're looking for the world's most comprehensive daily space weather content and most detailed solar imagery, you've come to the right place. And thanks for tuning in. We have some action happening in the southern hemisphere, namely the southwest, where a CME is on its way out as we make the video. You can also see some prominences. Some new sunspots have formed in the northeast, a coronal hole rotating in, some spectacular fireworks from just after midnight, and lots more to cover. So here are the past 24 hours. That's SDO 171 plus 131 angstroms. We have seen an increase in the X-ray flux, the background X-ray output of the closest star as well. But the main story is going to remain solar plasma filaments. So you can see some down there. One actually blasted off throughout the day today, and we'll show you some highly detailed coronagraphs so you can figure out for yourself whether or not they're earthly directed. There's the equatorial zoom. That's 193 plus 304 angstroms from SDO, which gives great contrast to things like plasma filaments. Moving along to some stats. The 10.7 centimeter radio flux is now at 165 solar flux units. 165 is the radio flux number. Pretty stagnant from yesterday. We can expect to see an uptick in the sunspot number going into tomorrow, assuming a bunch of sunspots don't rapidly degrade. So here's the NOAA forecast, and there's no space weather in the forecast. Things are calm out there. So let's blast through some more data. We won't worry about any Enlil spirals because, again, nothing new on the way. Although there will be a coronal hole high-speed stream coming in like 5 days. So the Earth geospace is calm. Here's a model of it, the Space Weather Modeling Framework. And yeah, the last CME impact was pretty much a dud. So there you go. The past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. Our geospace magnetosphere movie. Here's our ground magnetic perturbations map, and you can use this to check and see where it's likely to be seeing the aurora. But at the moment, you're only going to be likely to see the aurora in places where the aurora is regularly visible. We'll show you some imagery from Poland a little bit later in the video of some great purple and green aurora over a mountainous region of that country. KP index is at 1.67. KP 1.67 is the current state of affairs. And there is our real-time solar wind. It's calm. That's the data from ACE. There are ACE's latest readings. From Discover, about 4.5 protons per cubic centimeter solar wind density, solar wind velocity here, under 350 kilometers per second. So quite slow and quite diffuse. GOES magnetometers are calm. Earth has just in the past couple of hours entered into a North Pole-oriented magnetic sector, which we will show you next. The GOES magnetometers on the GOES 16 and GOES 18 are located in geosynchronous near equatorial orbits at about 23,500 miles of altitude. Here's our magnetic sector, and like I said, Earth has recently snapped into a North Pole magnetic sector. As you can see in the last image there, the latest potential field surface source line for Earth is now in the green. North Pole sector heliospheric current sheet has been crossed. Here's our line of sight field plot depicting the solar B field in blue, potential field surface source lines for the polar fields in red and green for south and north respectively, and then of course you've got the photosphere magnetism in grayscale. And it's a bit of an uptick here going on the past couple of days, the past 24 hours. Again, new sunspots showing up in that northeastern quadrant. Moving on to coronal holes. There's the coronal hole scenario, and we do have a fairly well-defined one rotating in here. That will be of North Pole orientation, and it could cause a fairly short-lived coronal hole high-speed stream in about 4 to 5 days, starting out with a density spike, decreased density, and then a velocity spike. That's the way coronal holes work, and let's move on to sunspots. So a little uptick in sunspot number here, approaching the number 120. So we got about 117 sunspots right now, according to that, the Royal Observatory of Belgium. And here's our flare probability monitor and scoreboard. So these sunspots in the southeast haven't been named yet, and it looks like the ones in the northeast haven't been named yet either. So, yeah, sunspot number to tick up again tomorrow, modestly, assuming no rapid growth happens. So we'll have more new sunspots than we will have setting regions in the west. So moving on to there's the view of the eastern portion of the closest star there, and you'll see the formation of those new sunspots there in your upper left. Take a moment to press the like button if you've failed to do so far, lest thy soul be cast into an ever-deepening and darkening abyss of doom, destruction, and ridiculous content on YouTube. Press like. If you're new to the channel, press subscribe. Press share, then visit the links below the video. There are a bunch of them. And hit us up on social media. We'll see you there. Let's move on to solar flares and energetic particles, as we do have a new proton event showing up. So, before we do that, there's the SDO colorized magnetogram. And none of these sunspots are super likely to be major solar flare players. So, they're all fairly simple sunspots. We do have some that are beta class. Again, not too exciting as far as solar flare players. Although we did see a background flux increase, which we'll get to next. There's another little proton event that showed up as well. That was just after midnight universal time there. Not quite reaching into warning levels. There may be some polar radio blackouts associated with that. Shouldn't be anything major. Likely to subside soon. And like I said, the background X-ray flux coming all the way up to about a C3. About a C3.5 background flux, something like that. So yeah, a little uptick in flaring there. And there is our ever-popular SDO imagery. That's 131 plus 94 angstroms. So those new sunspots in the northeast, they're not looking particularly active. Looks like the most activity has been from the southeast. So those sunspots there would be the T-mass, somewhere in that southeastern quadrant. Again, no major flares, nothing even in the M-class range for the past 24. Before we get to CMEs, a little brief solar system forecast. There's where things are today. Here's where things will be in a week. On the 19th, as we approach the solstice. Summer approaching quickly, folks. Get all your plans prepared now, because by the time you reach the solstice, the northern hemisphere is already losing sunlight. So don't be caught behind the 8 ball, not being properly prepared for the summer season. So here's what was going on over our head when we recorded this video. This one was recorded a little bit earlier than normal. So yeah, that was the state of affairs when we recorded this. It was 4:30 p.m. at this point in the recording session. So, of course, there is a varied time when we record the videos versus when we release them, but these were 24 hours of data when the video came out. So here is our auroral imagery there from Poland. Some great both green and vertical purple auroral columns happening there. Fantastic imagery. It's the apod.nasa.gov, the astronomy photo of the day. Moving on to CMEs. You will see some spectacular fireworks. We'll let you know if they're earthly directed here after we show you some more coronagraphs. There's George Mason University's. And here we've paused this. 23:12 last night is when you started to see some data appearing on the C2. And although it looks a little bit like a partial halo there, that is on the far side of the sun. So that is not earthly directed. We'll play it through for your viewing pleasure. So there's C2 plus C3. We'll also put those together in a great synced video for you here. Since then, things have been pretty chill, although, like I said, there have been some activities occurring around the southern polar region. as more plasma is ejecting, and more plasma can be expected to eject because, well, like I said, the story of the day, the last 3 days actually, is plasma filaments. So they're likely to produce earthly directed CMEs. And remember, folks, you don't need to see sunspots and you don't need to see solar flares to see coronal mass ejections. Coronal mass ejections happen regularly, even at solar minimum. No flares or sunspots are required for CMEs, and don't get CMEs and solar flares confused, as we hear so many channels on YouTube doing. Solar flares are photons. Coronal mass ejections are protons. Anyway, that's where stereo A is located, that red dot there to the right of Earth on that image. And here's what stereo A got to see early this morning. We'll let that play through. So there's that CME. It is on the far side. So hence it's nothing to write home about. So here are our custom coronagraphs. You've got also Venus over there on the left, Mercury on the right, and a great view there. Synced data from SDO as well as the LASCO C2 and C3. We'll zoom in a little closer just to sort of show you that there are no earthly directed CMEs. You won't see any plasma motions accompanying that major CME outburst. And there is some missing coronagraph data there, so we could actually have some Earth-directed CMEs, but at the moment, we don't have any data, so we're not going to forecast things we can't see. That would be short-sighted, wouldn't you say? So anyway, like I said, filaments will remain the story. And there's a scenario from Cerro Tololo, Chile. And check out the filaments. I mean, let's see. There's one. We'll call that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At least 7 or 8 large filaments on the Earth-facing side of the solar disk. We've also got some prominences there in the east, northern polar region, and the northwest. So plenty of stuff going on, and you can expect solar activity levels to remain around this level for the next 7 or 8 months, as we approach solar maximum, likely to arrive in October. So here's another view of what's going on there. Again, got a crown prominence down there at the southern polar region, as well as a CME very slowly making its way out. And also you can see that large prominence there rising up over the northeastern limb, which would be your screen upper left. Bonus features are next, starting with charging hazards, and we ain't got none. It's smooth sailing for satellites. Electron flux remains low. You can expect an uptick in that in the coming couple of days. And it looks like NOAA would agree with that. Within the next 48 hours, you can expect to see an uptick in the electron flux where it will reach back to nominal levels. Now, that electron flux is measured at the F layer of the ionosphere, which is at about 300 kilometers of altitude, right in there. And here is the ionosphere in vibrational frequency. And here's my phone deciding to play things that I certainly didn't click on. Yeah, it's just in my pocket, and it just starts playing stuff. Because reasons. Who remembers the 80s and 90s when software generally functioned? Wasn't that a golden age of computing, folks? So yeah, that's what's going on in the ionosphere. The South Atlantic anomaly remains on the South American coast, which is not where it's generally been over the past 6 years of creating videos like this. So basically, if you look right there where my arrow is located, the South Atlantic anomaly is right near the 45-degree west longitude line on the South American coast. So it's very obvious from the anomalygram there that depicts anomaly in megahertz from the 30-day median. Just follow that negative 45-degree line there at the bottom of the map. Follow that up to the South American coast, and the South Atlantic anomaly is now on the Atlantic coast instead of well into the interior of the South American continent. If that's got you spooked, definitely go hide in a bunker. I don't know why it would get you spooked. Probably because you don't understand the physics of it, and fearmongers on YouTube have convinced you that it's somehow scary or dangerous. Sorry about that, but not my fault. What people idiotically say. Remember, folks, never blame a conspiracy on that which is more easily attributable to basic everyday ignorance and stupidity. So we've got some major anomalies here in the Global Ionosphere Nowcast. You're going to see a big sort of signal blackout there on the anomaly maps. Not sure what's up with that, but we aren't seeing really the total electron contents do anything super weird here. So that could be something like a communications error. Some packets may have been lost during that period. Or maybe servers went down and were unable to measure the anomaly correctly or display it. So, but whatever reason there, doesn't look like anything to get bunchy panties about. Couple more views of the closest star here. There is the latest continuum and latest magnetogram. These new sunspots have been fairly modest. Let's take a quick tour of this eastern quadrant. So it looks like 3 new groups in the northeast. They're all beta class sunspots, I would suspect. And then down here we've got at least 2 new groups that ought to get names. And those are the most promising sunspots for large solar flares, in my opinion. So let's briefly look at those along with the magnetogram. So yeah, that sunspot in the lower left there, that is going to be the most likely sunspot to produce a large flare in the next 24 hours. It has the most magnetic shear. So that's the scenario with that. Besides that, things are fairly uneventful. The second most likely place would be from this sunspot group here. It did produce a little bit of activity in the past 24 hours, but again, it has been fairly modest. Anyway, we'll show you some more imagery of this awesome 193 plus 304 angstroms wavelength. Because, like I said, the past 3 days, the story remains filaments. So expect to see more CMEs. The likelihood of not seeing CMEs in the next 24 hours is basically 0%. It is 0% because there's one jumping off as we make the video. So anyway, thanks for tuning into the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. We'll see you soon. I've been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-A-Mash, signing off. Back to the bunker, and may that solar wind be at your back.